I'm I'm Mary. I'm an alcoholic. When I first met our speaker about 3.5 years ago, I really wasn't sure what to think of him. I thought he was a little manic. I had no idea where he got the energy to do the things that he does. But, over that time period, I have been able to see him walk through some really difficult things in this program and stay sober. And he's been one of those people that I look up to. And, when I have something going on, I look to how people like Bruiser have dealt with these things. And I see him come into meetings, share what's going on, and keep going. And, he is the epitome of making sure that people feel included. Um, he's always, all of the holidays, he's got something going on, and he's really good about making sure that if someone doesn't have a place to go, they can come to him. And that is so incredibly important in this program, especially early on. And I really appreciate that. And the service, he does a ton of service. And, that's the kind of person that I like to model myself on. So I will introduce Bruiser.
That was waterworks. uh Bruiser alcoholic. Um, I want to thank Dan for willing to step down. There was a double confusion on who was speaking today. Um, okay, so my sobriety date is January 14th, 2018. Um, and my sobriety didn't come willing. It was one of those aspects that I just decided to come to the program um because I didn't want to be in trouble anymore. Right? I didn't come to the program because I was an alcoholic. I didn't come to the program because, I was addicted to things. I came because I wanted probation to leave me alone. I wanted my parents to leave me alone. I wanted to prove to the world that my drinking's not the problem, it's everyone else was the problem. And so what happened was I was on ISP and I got caught, and so they sent me to jail. And when I was in jail, I was sitting for 30 days, and I convinced my parents that if they bailed me out, that I'd go to rehab because I was an alcoholic, right? But I didn't believe it. I just said that. So with that being said, I got out and I drank, right? And that was a Saturday. Then Sunday I went to church and there was someone in the program and they asked me if I'd go to a meeting and I wasn't willing. And I was like willing to do anything, but I wasn't willing to do that. So I ended up getting a meeting list from them. And the next morning I showed up to Sunrise Group. I was late. It was in August or July, and like the doors were open, and I came down to the kitchen side, and the meeting had already started. And I was like, "Is there a meeting going on?" And like the guy that was doing coffee, don't know who it was, but if looks can kill, that would have been the moment. And as soon as I walked into the kitchen, they asked, "Is there anybody new?" Right? And I lost, and I feel like I was spoke forever, but I was like, I don't know why I'm here, and I started crying. And they told me to sit in front of the table where the little pamphlets are, and that's my seat. And to this day, I still sit there when I go there, right? Um, but that wasn't, I wish I could say like that's when I got sober because it wasn't. Um, so I'm gonna start with the reading. Out of the 12 and 12, chapter 3, this is one of my favorite of all the readings. And it says, "This is like opening of a door, which to all appearance is still closed and locked. All we need is a key, and the decision to swing the door open. There is only one key, and that is called willingness. Once unlocked by willingness, the door opens almost of itself. And look through it, we shall see a pathway beside which is inscribed. It reads, 'This is the way to a faith that works.' Once we have placed the key of willingness in the lock and have the door ever so slightly open, we find that we can always open it more. Though self will slam it shut again, as it frequently does, it will always respond the moment we again pick up this key of willingness. Maybe this is all sounds like a mysterious or remote, something like Einstein's theory of reality, or yeah, relativity, or the proposition of nuclear physics. It isn't at all. Let's look at how practical it actually is. Every person who has joined AA and intends to stick has, without realizing it, made a beginning on this. Isn't it true that in all matters touching upon alcohol, each of them has decided to turn their life over to the care, protection, and guidance of Alcoholics Anonymous? Already a willingness has been achieved to cast out one's own will and one's own idea about the alcohol problem in favor of those suggested by AA. Any willing newcomer who feels sure AA is the only safe harbor for the foundering vessel there has become. Now, if this is not turning one's will and life over to the newfound province of willingness, then what is it? So that was my thing, right? So what it was like. Started drinking when I was 8 years old. I can give every excuse. I was in foster care, then I was adopted as a teenager, but then I was already grown up. You know, my mom died, my brother died. I didn't have family. All I had was my grandmother. Like all these excuses I could have, right? But reality, I had this concept that because I was always told I wasn't going to amount to nothing. So I had this concept that if I did great in school, perfect attendance, honor student, then I can do whatever I wanted, right? And that's how I lived my life when I was young. I was involved with student council and getting the good grades because I wanted to prove to the world that I can do something. But I also did not know how to live within the world. So I would, after school, I'd go drink, then I would do drugs, and this all started by the time I was 8, I was drinking. By the time I was 12, I was doing cocaine, and that was my cycle because I didn't know any better. And I had the concept that as long as my priorities and responsibilities were taken care of, I can do whatever I wanted. So as I grew up, that was the mentality. I graduated high school early and got a scholarship to college, and I flunked down, lost my scholarship my first semester. But it wasn't because I did bad, it's because they didn't give me the guidelines and what I had to do to maintain that scholarship. So I didn't take all the required amount of credit, right? And so it was their fault that I lost it. It was really easy during my drinking career that everyone else was to blame. And so when I was, 17 in college, I dropped out. Then I started working at a Whataburger. So I spent half my time in Big Fork growing up and half my time in Arizona. So during school year, I was in Arizona. Summers, I was in Big Fork. Because when I was adopted, my parents were from here. So we spent our summers here. And I was born in Tucson, Arizona. And so that's where I knew, that's all I knew really. And I wasn't adopted till I was 14. So I lived with my parents for about a year or so. And then I started running away. Once I got to high school, I'd, go stay with my grandmother. And there was a lot, they knew where I was. So it wasn't really, and they knew that the more that they tried to push me to be around, that it was just going to be trouble. So I lived with my grandma a lot. And then when I was 17, did the college thing. Well, I learned how to create fake IDs, right? And things, so I was able to get an apartment. I was able to get, these things. And I was a con man. By the time I was 18, I would go in to payday loan centers, which we don't have those here, down there, and I would get fake payday loans that I didn't even have a job. I'd create these and I'd create these fake social security cards and I'd create these ID and they didn't check that stuff back then. Um, and it was how I survived. And so then my grandmother had all these pain pills, right? And she didn't take them, but she just had this cabinet of building up pain pills, oxys and volumes. So when I was working at Whataburgers, I was selling them through the drive-through to cover my drinking because I don't believe in pills, right? But I need a drink. And that's where my cycle began. And it was young, and I didn't have the guiding light to teach me wrong from right. And so I had to figure out what that was. And in that process, I caused a lot of destruction. By the time I went to school, I went back to school and to pursue nursing. And got my associates in that because my dad is a doctor. So I thought I was going to become a nurse practitioner, right? And so I was working in his lab and doing phlebotomy work and learning how to do all that stuff. And then when I was in school, I met this woman, and didn't know she was already pregnant, but then I thought I got her pregnant. So then I thought we were having a kid, right? And so for 2.5 years, I was a single dad because she was off doing her own thing. Then we were supposed to be making a trip to Big Fork, and she wanted to see our kid. So I let her take him, and then we were supposed to leave the next day. She never showed back up. I came up to Big Fork, and then I came home. My house was emptied out. I had restraining order papers on the table, right? And come to find out, it wasn't even my kid. So I spent this whole life that I was trying to build for this kid that wasn't mine, and there's nothing I can do about it. So I decided, and I knew at that moment that if I stayed in Tucson, I was going to destroy my life because I was already using drugs bad. I was already drinking, and I was doing it like on the weekends when the kid wasn't there, but it was with school and everything. Like I needed to do that so I could fit in. I needed to do drugs so I can pass my exams, right? Like this was just a psychotic thought process that I had. So I packed up what was left into a Jeep Rubicon, loaded my dogs up into the two dogs, and I drove to Montana. It took me 5 days to get here, and it's only a 21-hour drive. Uh, I got lost. I got drunk. It talks like I didn't know where I was going, but I knew I was supposed to end up in Big Fork. And I finally did. And when I got here, things were okay for a moment, right? And then my best friend decided he was going to move with me, right? And at this time, like, so I also date guys. And so at this time, like, me and him, we had a relationship, but we were just friends, but we were like sleeping together, doing that thing, right? And he decided he was gonna come to Montana with me because he didn't want me to deal with this on my own. And I was like, perfect. Best friend's gonna be here. We're gonna fucking just do this. I'm gonna get back at school, gonna do what I need to do. So I got a place in Big Fork and he came up by bus and things were okay for a little bit. Right. The thing about Big Fork though is everyone knew me at the bar, so I can go and I can drink for days and just rack a tab up and then just show up once a week and pay it off. Right. And so I was going to the Flathead and I was trying to continue this nursing thing they had a university state program there through the hospital. And I was trying to still do all that as well as hide my feelings and emotions, right? Because I'm in that mentality, priorities, responsibilities. Okay, my priority is I have a roof over my head. Responsibilities, I need to get this education and I need to do something myself. And I'm gonna drink in the process. And I moved to Montana because I thought it was innocent. I only spent summers here. I only knew the life of being on the lake and the lake towns. And I knew Kalispell only because that was the only place that had a Wells Fargo. So I knew how to get there and back. But I didn't know that Montana had drugs. I didn't know that Montana wasn't as pure and innocent as I thought because I was sheltered. And so I got here thinking that I was going to be safe. So after being at the bars long enough, I started finding people who like was doing cocaine. And then I just started discovering like drugs here are so expensive, but I have connects down there. So let me back up. So they got to a point to where me and him didn't work out. I was drinking too much. He fucking started drinking. He wanted to go home. We went back and it was a fight. And then I just left him there. And then I came back and I just drank. I couldn't keep a job. I quit working or doing school. I tried working at the steakhouse. I got fired because I went to the bar next door to drink before work because I thought that was a great idea. I just couldn't maintain. So I decided, I know what I'm going to do. I'm going to teach rock climbing. Never rock climbed in my life, but I'm going to go get certified. I'm going to teach rock climbing. So I signed up for this advanced training program and bought all the gear, and they were not going to let me do it because I had no training. And I said, this is the thing. I've already spent all the money. I have all this gear. And if you don't let me do it, I'm going to figure out how to do it, right? This instructor was terrified from me. And he said that I was like the most terrified student he's ever had. So we go out and I started learning rock climbing. And now I'm really passionate about rock climbing. And so I did that. I started teaching rock climbing and then I got involved with the pyramid scheme, right? That sell nutritional health packets. So what I was doing was I was selling packet, like a rock climbing set, 2-day rock climbing session with this nutritional health package to get fit. right? But that was all really a cover up because now I'm selling drugs and I'm drinking, right? And I wasn't really big into the hard drugs yet. Like I wasn't really big into meth. Cocaine was my thing and like alcohol. I like to drink and then I want to drink more. So then I need to get high. So then I keep drinking, right? That was a balance. But then when I saw the demand of for meth, I was like, okay. So I started driving to, I would fly or drive to Arizona, bring it back. I'd fly with it on planes. That was before TSA was so stand on the machine and spin. You just walk through, right? And I did it in a way that I dressed as a professional when I'd fly, suit, tie, briefcase, right? To where no one was going to question me. Because my whole thing during my drinking career was I have to keep maintain an image to look like I am doing well. Because as long as the rest of the world thinks I'm doing well, then I'll think I'm doing well. Right. And I didn't realize that's how I thought about it then, but today that's how it was. I didn't want my grandmother to know I was struggling. I didn't want my parents to know I was struggling. I wanted everyone to think that I got here and life's fucking great. Um, it wasn't. I started, I ended up meeting this other dude that was, I was doing drugs with in Arizona. And then we started traveling back and forth. And so I spent a lot of time in Vegas. I had a place in Vegas. I had a place in Arizona. I had a place here just because I was making all these trips and I needed pit stops. So that way I knew that I wasn't being followed. I knew I was being safe. So it was crazy. I was crazy. And um, I was living in, um, so I lost the place in Big Fork, moved to Columbia Heights, which is like Columbia Falls next door. And I got a place in Columbia Falls and Columbia Heights. And the place in Columbia Heights was drug station, right? That's where I did that. And then my place in Columbia Falls was the house where the dogs were. But if you showed up at night, it looked like Fort Knox. I had mag lights everywhere, cameras everywhere. I was a little crazy, right? And the thing is, and I'd go out every night to the bars and drink. I would drive to Polson to the casino because I can gamble and drink, right? I did not have an idea of how destructive I was being because I had money, I had houses, I was renting apartments and stuff. Like I had cars. Like to me, from an outside perspective, I looked pretty successful, right? But I was miserable. I was unhappy. And because I was never, the thing I did is I moved here, I brought myself with me and I never faced the problems and the trauma that I had come from. I didn't face, when I was younger, I was in therapy and when I wanted to do therapy again, but I only wanted to work with my old therapist and I couldn't. And so like I just quit and I started trying to figure out how to self-medicate myself. I'm ADHD and bipolar and I have a lot of things going. Um, so what ended up happening was I bought a new truck. And this is where my down spiral really got going. I bought a new truck and I didn't even have it 7 days. I drove it to Arizona to show my parents and my grandmother, right? I got lost getting to Arizona and I've done the drive 1,000 times. Like I don't know. I was always so fucked up when I traveled that I'd get lost all the time. And I always I had this Arizona was like a vortex and I could never leave it. It would always take me days to try to get out of there because I'd get stuck in Flagstaff at the bar and just next thing you know, it's 2 days later and I'm still in Flagstaff. And I'm do not understand why. So somehow, I don't know, I ended up on the border of New Mexico, Arizona, coming in. It was crazy how lost I get. And at this point, I've been doing the drive 1,000 times. So I came back. I was there 2 days, came back, and I was in the process. I was trying to buy a house, and I was staying in my camper. I had a slide-in camper, and I was staying on the other side of Lakeside, down at a campground. And of course, I was hanging out with people, right, that would pretty much co-sign on my drinking. So, and I'm in my early 20s and I was hanging out with this kid that was 19 and I was drunk and I was out on my wave runners. So I called him. I said, go get my truck and pick me up. Right. So he went and got my truck from the campsite and picked me up. He could have he picked me up in his own car, but I didn't like his car. So I wanted my truck. Right. And we're driving back and he's driving because I'm intoxicated. And he said something and the craziness, I decided I was going to bite him, right? And when I bit him, he jerked the wheel and we went into a ditch and we flipped and slammed into a mountain. And all I could think was like, no one can know I was drinking, right? And so shattered his hip. I broke my leg. And instead of like, are you okay? I was like, the story is a deer ran in front of us. Remember that. That's what happened. And I and because he was under his parents' insurance, my insurance company went after his parents and they got him. And it was havoc, right? I'm caught. And so this is where my story really gets dark because now I'm using meth, right? I'm selling drugs. I was selling fentanyl and I had some people, I wasn't directly doing it, I had people doing it. And I had this lady who decided to cut up fentanyl patches that I had given her and sell them to minors. And I had a kid who almost died. And instead of me stopping, what I did is I found the kid. I said, and he was only like a couple months from being 18. I said, stay sober. And when you turn 18, I'll teach you how to do drugs and do this right. And I did. And I did that. Because I felt that at least because I felt I knew how to drink and do drugs the right way, right? And everyone else was doing it wrong. Um, so after I flipped my truck, I ended up going to Arizona for a little bit to try to heal. Then I came back up here and I was lit. Now I had a camper van that I bought in Arizona because I couldn't be in Arizona no more. And I wanted to get home, but I didn't have a car, right? Because I've already rode my truck. So I got one of those creeper, a big blue tinted window, mirror window camper creeper van, Chevy, and I fucking loaded it up and I came back. And I was living in that, right? And today I realized I've been homeless a lot of times, but I never accepted it until recently because I was like, I have money. I'm making the choice to live like this, right? It's not because I have to, but I had to. I couldn't. No one would rent to me. I couldn't do anything. So I was here in Missoula. I was at Motel 6 and I was out drinking at the bar and I met this guy and we ended up like hooking up and he needed a ride back to Kalispell and I needed to go to Kalispell or to Big Fork. So I was like, okay, cool, great idea. But this dude was a drug dealer. I'm a drug dealer. We're drinking. Like life was unmanageable, but I thought he was perfect, right? I was like, and he had a kid and I was still feeling this void of losing, not having a kid, right? So I was like, I know what I'm gonna do. I'm gonna teach him and we're gonna become a family and life's gonna be great because like I met his son, his ex-wife, and his best friend all in the same day, and at the time, this dude was like not out. And like I came into his life like a wrecking ball, outed him, and like we built this life together, right? That lasted 5 years. And we opened up an auto shop, and I thought life was really good. But the thing is, I was trying to do the sober thing in a way like we'd only drink on weekends, right? Or when we didn't have the kid, and we only hung out with the friend, like we drank with other parents. So that way it looked like we were being responsible, right? And we're not out like running around with hooligans and like meth heads. We're just other parents who have careers and stuff, and we're doing all the same things. Spent the holidays, and I was a Cub Scout leader, and I was doing these things and person in my community. And so I thought I was, again, my priorities, responsibilities was how I persuaded need to be. Um, well, I ended up getting really sick and he said he was going to be there and he was there, but he wasn't there. So now I'm sick. I'm raising the kid. I'm trying to run our business. It's going under because now we're using it as just to launder drugs, a spot to, auto shops, if they're open like at midnight, they're not an auto shop at that point, right? Like we're doing drug and doing that thing. And finally I asked for a divorce because I was sick. He wasn't ever around. There was a moment where we had a 3-story house. There was a moment where I had his ex-wife living downstairs, my mother-in-law living on the second floor, and we were on the third floor. Right? Because I was trying to build this ideal family. And I thought if I had everyone around, I can save everyone. And they're all drinking and doing drugs. I wanted to be their saving life. But in the process, I just went down a darker hole because I felt worse. I felt like shit. And the only way I knew how to cope with anything was through drinking. So I'd go out to the bars late at night. I'd hook up with married women. That was like my favorite thing to do. And then like go and like hang out with their husbands and they wouldn't know. And I thought it was just the coolest thing. I've gotten in lots of fights at the bars because then they do find out. Um, and And I just didn't understand why I was so unhappy. I could not put it together. So I got divorced and I decided that, and I still had this van, right? But I also had like a nice car and I had a truck, but I still had this van because, it was cool. And it was, I ended up deciding I was going to go to Vegas. Right. And I only had access to the van because my ex-husband was crazy and he had the car keys and he had the dogs. And so I was like, fuck it. I'm just going to get in my van again and we're going to go to Vegas because I'm going to go to Vegas and I'm going to go to school to become an interior designer. And that's what I'm going to do now. Well, there's nothing in Vegas but drinking, right? And when you don't know anyone, what do? You get online, you try to meet people. Well, I came with a bunch of drugs, so I didn't have money. And I was like, okay, well, I'm back into the same side. But it was different because it was in a different place and I was doing it differently this time. I made sure I wasn't doing drugs anymore, and I was just doing the drinking and I was just selling the drugs and I was trying to behave on like who I hung out with. I made sure they weren't married anymore. And I made sure that like these different things, but that only lasted for so long because I was like, this isn't fun. And I wanted to go back to what was fun. And that was pissing people off, breaking the law, and doing those things. So I ended up getting a um job at a bar because when I was in college, I went to bartending academy because I need to know how to make my drinks, right? And I loved going to the bars and throw crazy drinks at the bartender just to like throw them through a loop and then like piss them off and tell them that they don't know how to make drinks. Because I'm an asshole like that, right? I wanted to cause havoc in everyone's life because I was so miserable, but I thought I was happy and I didn't realize that's what I was doing. So I was in Vegas for about 4 months. During that time, my ex had called me and I got in my car and I ran back to Montana. By the time I got here, he didn't want nothing to do with me again, right? But this time I was able to get my other car and I was able to get my dog. So that was cool, but now she's pregnant. And so I'm like, okay, well, we're going back to Vegas because I had this weekly rental apartment. Because that's what you can do in Vegas. You can rent an apartment for a week, you can rent it for a day, whatever you're trying to do. And that it seemed legit because I had a roof over my head, I had car, and I had money. But nothing was legit that I was doing. I was still being a con man, and I was still, because I got rid of all that. But then when I was struggle, I knew the only thing that would work is if I start manipulating people again and I start getting what I wanted. And I came off like I was the most loving, caring person and I cared about what you had to say, but I was just going to use you for what I needed. We had a scheme going on, me and a bunch of other dudes, where we would like be able to scan people's credit cards by walking by them and use them. And then we would hook up with people, but we wouldn't go to actually hook up. We'd go there to like blackmail them because they would be like married business people. It was fucked up. And the crazy thing is in the last 4 years after I've gone through the steps and I've made them, I'm just recently starting to realize all this extra shit that I was doing and how damaging it was and how okay it wasn't. So I left Vegas, not because I wasn't doing anything with my life, because what I did was I would go out at 5, come home at 5 a.m., sleep for a couple hours, but my dog was taken care of. I had a roof over my head. I was doing good. I came back because it got too hot in Vegas. So I came back to Montana. When I came back, I did the same thing, right? I ended up meeting a buddy of mine. We started a tree cutting business, but we're both alcoholics, so that didn't work. But then I met this chick, started hanging out with her, and I was living in a 32-foot RV, and I wasn't homeless because I had an RV, and it was my choice because I had money. Well, she was also needed saved. She had an abusive boyfriend, so I decided I was going to take her from him, and we were going to have a life together. And during this time, I'm really big in God. Okay, I've been baptized. I am running prayer groups. I would be the guy that would go to the drug dealer's house and then talk the Lord to them and try to convince them to come to church with me. I would hook up with people and then like who were like and then they'd feel really bad because they were married or whatever. And then I would be like, but God got you. Like we could go do this. And like, so I was fucked up. Right. And I thought I was going to become a pastor and preach to the world. And she was going to be the pastor wife. We go on a road trip to Idaho. I got rid of all the drugs. She got pissed off. Pops got called on me. She called her friends. and they said I kidnapped her. So now the Idaho state troopers are looking for me in this RV because they thought I kidnapped her, but she just wanted to get away from me because I wouldn't let her to get high anymore because I'm trying to become a pastor now. So drinking was the only thing that was okay. That didn't work. I'm not a pastor. Um, so anyways, I came back and I started hanging out with someone and they were felons. And so I started getting a bunch of felonies. And it wasn't because it was because they were the felons, right? If I just didn't hang out with felons, I wouldn't have the problem. So fast track it to I had 17 felonies pending against me, 3 different states, 5 different counties. And it was all because of the other people. Most of them got dismissed because they got caught and I was there. So a lot of it was, in a sense, their fault. But I ended up getting my first felony charge out of Idaho and Bonners Ferry. And that was like and then that's when all the other ones came. Well, I ended up started writing checks to all the town pumps in Montana that racked up to like $6,000. So then they put charges against me. So that was my first one that stuck. After that, I was told I couldn't drink, I couldn't do drugs. Well, then I started racking up more felonies, right? So now I have 5 felonies. And I just in October have been released from all of my parole and everything, so I'm free from the system. So that's kind of nice. But so you think all that I would know that I had a problem. Well, I didn't. And what happens, because like I said, I was on probation, right? And I needed to prove to the world that I need to get sober. So anyways, I got sober. I met my sponsor. I started doing lots of meetings. At the time, I was living in my RV and out by the Y, and I had a bike. So every morning, I would bike from out there 10, 12 miles all the way to the sunrise meeting. From the sunrise meeting, I'd come to the club. From the club, I'd go to the nooner. Then I'd come back when the club used to be cool to hang out. We hang out here, a bunch of us. And then I'd go to another meeting, and I was doing 5, 6 meetings a day, right? And I was really doing this, but I wasn't doing it. I just had nowhere to go, right? No one wanted me around. And I wasn't, and I got a sponsor. I was, cleaning coffee cups. I was greeting. I was doing step work. I was doing it all. Well, I went to rehab after 30 days of doing all that. So I went to rehab and I thought I knew what I was doing. And I haven't really told many people part of the story. Like I said, a lot of the stories come to reality. And so I've been telling. So while I was in rehab, I snuck out, went down to the gas station to buy alcohol. They wouldn't sell it because they knew there was a rehab center. So then one of the guys was local who was in there. So I gave him $100 to go try to buy drugs. His drug dealer wouldn't sell it to him because he knew he was in rehab. Who has a moral drug dealer, right? And that's what I tried to do. So I got out of rehab. I ended up getting a place. So now I have stability. My life's great. I got a job and I'm working the program. Well, I was miserable because I wasn't willing to actually be in the program. I wasn't willing to accept that I was an alcoholic. I wasn't willing to believe that I had a problem. 6 months into it, I quit calling my sponsor, quit going to meetings. I was like, let's see if they really care, right? We don't chase people, but I wanted to be chased. I wanted to know that the program cared about me. So this was Christmas time. I was miserable. I was unhappy. My parents were here. My grandmother was here. I fucking hated the world. They left. New Year's comes around. I relapsed. I go to the casino because I was lonely. So I'm going to go hang out at the casino, right? And I relapsed. Within 7 days of that relapse, and I was supposed to be proven to the system that I didn't deserve to be locked up. So they were giving me 6 months to prove that I didn't need it, that I could be sober and they wouldn't lock me up. Well, 7 days into it, I relapsed and I was in prison. I did that. I got out. I tried doing it by myself and it wasn't working. And I kept seeing my sponsor's truck. I was like, this motherfucker. So I was like, I called them, right? And I got back in the program, and now here I am doing this, right? And what that looks like today is I have a sponsor. I sponsor people. I'm of service. I have service sponsees. I involved in everything from here, just being of service, as was said earlier, if anyone doesn't have nowhere to go for Thanksgiving, I have at the bakery 4:00. We all have Thanksgiving, we do Christmas, we do Halloween, I do Easter, I do all the holidays, and we just open the doors. I send out mass messages to wherever and tell them to invite whoever. I go to meetings, I try to invite the newcomer because when I got sober, I was alone and I had nowhere to go. And I know that, we destroyed the world around us and we caused such havoc and damage to those near us that people don't want us around. And it's so hard for us to accept that we'd rather isolate and just not admit defeat. So I decided that we're going to do these things, and because of this program, I have a business. I went back to school for the right thing, and I graduated with honors, and I walked away with 3 degrees, and I got married. And in this whole time, my husband, now we met. Within a couple months, my grandma had failed, and he said, "Let's move her in with us." And for the first time, she was willing to move in with me. And so we flew to Arizona, loaded up her U-Haul, drove back up. And my grandma lived with us for years. And my husband took care of her for years. And we opened our business, and she worked for us till 5 days before she died, right? And my going out was going to be when grandma dies, I can stop being sober, right? But I didn't. When grandma died, I went to the rooms. I did what I was told to do. I leaned on my sponsor. I leaned on, my friends in the program. And I just said I was helpless. I need help. I'm defeated. I'd go and I would just cry and I would just sit there. And I did not know what to do. I tried to divorce my husband in the process because I was so angry. And then my grandma's dog died and I was even more angry and I thought it was his fault. I just hated the world because she was all that I had left. And I realized that, staying sober is more than just trying to, it's not for someone else, right? But I get to live a life worth living and I get to give back to my community. And, service work is my foundation. I've been in service work since I got sober. It's the only thing that's kept me in the rooms throughout the years because I have that commitment, that obligation to be at a business meeting, to be at a district meeting, to be at area. I oversee the whole crisis line for Montana right now. I've been involved with the hotline for 5 years, and it is the most amazing thing. And, I'm a very big advocate about the hotline and how important it is. And, today, when I went to my first area assembly, all these people, if you've never been at area, all these officers sit in suits and they stare at you, right? I was like, I'm never going to be that guy. Well, I'm that guy. And I sit there and my first area when I was elected, I had a breakdown in front of everyone, right? And that's okay today. It's okay to cry. It's okay to be vulnerable. It's okay to ask for help, and between service work, unity and recovery, right? What that looks like for me is I'm a service everywhere for the newcomer all the way to my area district and home group level. Um, when it comes to unity, it's not just going to meetings, right? It's also about going, being there to talk to the newcomer. It's about fellowship. I'm a big advocate about fellowship. If you're feeling alone, get involved. So go early, ask people to hang out with you. People will hang out. When they say announcements, make an announcement that you're looking to hang out, right? Like, we got to be willing. And if we're not willing, we don't get sober because I had to be miserable as fuck. And I was 18 months sober, miserable as fuck. When my sponsor said, "When are you going to accept yourself?" And when he told me that, I was so famished because I'm like, that makes no sense. I do service work. I'm a sponsor. Like, how do you not accept? He's like, you don't accept that you're an alcoholic. And that was a real thing because I was still in denial after everything that I had to do this, that I suffered from a disease of alcoholism, and that I had to maintain a spiritual fit program on a daily to live a life worth living. And when I started doing that, I've got so much better. I had, and today I run my company, most of my employees are in the program, right? Because I want to be able to provide a place for people. Like I said, we host events. I'm always there for the newcomer. I do 12-step calls because that's what's going to keep me sober. And I don't do it for the people that I'm doing. I'm doing it because I need to stay sober because it reminds me of where I came from. And that's what the beauty of service work does. It keeps me where I need to be. So with that, I'm grateful for the people in the room and others. That's all I got.
All right, all right. Thanks, Bruiser. That was fantastic. Before closing Let us remember that anonymity is the spiritual foundation of all of our traditions. On a personal level, tell anyone you wish that you are an AA member, but please do not reveal the identity of anyone else. You can find an audio recording of this meeting and past speakers on our YouTube channel. Our channel is @SundaySpeaker, so the full address is youtube.com/@SundaySpeaker. Or you can search for the @SundaySpeaker channel. Are there any announcements? Hi, Jim. Wonderful. Thanks, Jim. Thanks for all your service with the coffee. Anybody else? Any other announcements?